You know, generally, some of us were very worried when Mr. Nkabinde was very casual about your trip to Richards Bay or Mbangi, that side. Yes. We're very worried about that level of casualty on his part. And when you are saying today, the evidence at your disposal, beside the information, the knowledge you have, because we're part of this, is that, and that can even be corroborated by the tracker information. I wanted to ask the question, would you be comfortable to share that information with the ad hoc committee? Because I think it's, well, maybe if it's not the ad hoc committee, if for some reasons it may be a problem with the ad hoc committee, it could be another committee that deals with sensitive matters. You know, the reason why I'm raising that matter is because your intervention in this regard completely changes the storyline that we were led into by Mr. Nkabinde. Because now the trip, according to you, is right from point A to point B, as opposed to point A, point B, point C. Because he's the way he narrated the story and your journey. I mean, when he uses the term a boy's trip, it almost has certain connotations, which I'm sure you understand. So that's why I'm asking the question, in order to consolidate the evidence we are putting before us in challenging his assertion, would you be comfortable that that information become accessible?
Remember, I am a citizen in this country, and I know that information can be private, but some information is public. You only need to take an ID number of a person to punch it, and you get all the profile of the things that the person owns. So a vehicle is one of those. For me to hide and say I cannot give this committee the details of that vehicle would be wrong. For transparency, I'll hand over. It is not my car, I must disclose that. It's my wife's car. She controls the tracker. I've asked her to throw me the tracker, and she went and threw the tracker and she gave it to me. So you can have it. I don't think it's a problem. I don't think she would have a problem in sharing that either. But the tracker will show you that we left the address that Mkhwanazi put on his statement on that particular date, and we stopped at Mr. Mkhwanazi's residence at Mbangi. We switched off, we went in, we drank coffee, we ate cookies. We greet each other, friendly talk, back into the car. We drove from there, we stopped in Durban. I was a driver.
No, I think, I'm raising that matter because I do remember you said the tracker is from a vehicle of your wife, and she is not before us. So we can only rely on you to engage with her to agree for that information to be made available. And I was asking precisely because I know things relating to tracker and all of that will somehow involve ID, identity information of an individual involved. But if you say it can be made available, I think we'll appreciate that because it addresses a particular issue with regard to the purpose of the trip from Durban to Northern Durban. I think the next issue I wanted to just to verify it has to do with at some point I remember you were inviting Sbia to come to the awards in KZN. And you know, sometimes because we are talking to you as police officers, one of the things that one has learned is that it's not everything that happens which is as we see it. Some of the things are happening not in a way that ordinary people, civilians like ourselves, who are not police officers, who are not trained there, will understand in the way in which, and I will tell you why I'm making this point when I'm asking the question subsequent to this one. But your invitation of SBA to attend the awards, was it just an invitation?
You're talking about the police awards?
Yes.
I did not invite him. It's national awards that were held in Durban.
Oh, it was national awards. So he was going to be attending because it's part of the national program.
Yeah. I invited the entire management and the police chiefs to an excursion that I was organizing. So he joined the excursion that I was hosting. But he was there for the Excellence Awards. That is a national event. I did not invite him on that one.
Okay.
I'm not sure. Maybe he said I invited him for the event July either. Because I spoke to him before the event July. Before the July 6th.
No, I don't remember him saying that. And then the meeting with Sinon, General Sinon, and Major General.
I'm going to invite this commission, this ad hoc committee to start getting used to using the constitutional titles.
Okay.
So that you don't get confused much about these generals. Say the commissioners, not.
Commissioner. Okay. But that meeting with Mr. Sinon, I think it's even safe to say Mr. Sinon and Mr. Matala, I can't remember who said to us, that meeting was in one of the units at the Pearls Hotel, and that person was making a conclusion on the basis of how easy it was to access whatever that was available in that room for consumption. And the conclusion was to the extent that, no, this is Mkhwanazi's a flat or apartment. I don't know if you have commented on that since you are back with us today.
Yes, I did speak early this morning, and I tried to describe the size of that apartment, the living room. Between the dining room where we were seated, the lounge where the TV is with only one couch, that's how small it is, and the kitchen, a small kitchen that is there. So I did explain to the members that if from one point to another in that room, it will not be more than 5 meters. That's how small it is. And in one bedroom. So if somebody were to say, if Nona said, at times I will go to the bedroom, then you will have an excuse of saying he didn't hear what we were talking about. But if he claims that he had gone to the fridge to get something to drink, the fridge was literally less than 2 meters from the table where we seated. If he goes to the fridge, he did not go to the fridge. I'm just saying if he did, but he did not go there. There was no alcohol drank on the day.
It was only water.
I think it was water and some juice there.
Okay.
There's no alcohol that was drank on the day.
That issue of, I think one of my colleagues was raising this question with you earlier on, and I want to take it slightly further. Is it Tibeti or Matibeti, the person?
Matibeti.
Matibeti. The party that I want to ask you to comment on generally is the one that, because I think you had said earlier on, after the quarrel between you and him and the court challenges or proceedings that have taken place, you started getting some people from or who are associated with his company raising all sorts of things about the way in which business is being conducted, which is not proper and in line with our laws. How do we explain, or how do you understand, but how do we explain as well the seeming coincidence that at the time when he's on a toe-to-toe with you legally, and then people start saying things that were never said to you before you had a fight with him? What could be the reason for that?
Well, I think people maybe realize that they might have been afraid to come out until they realize that someone who's not afraid of Matibeti, then they feel free. I had said that the man is closer to Getemane, the taxi, one of the taxi bosses in KZN. Getemane had issues with me. He still has, I believe. He has taken the police to court. He have gone to social media, podcast, and said all sorts of things about me. But I've never had anyone coming to me and say, here's something we have against Getemane that must lead into a case. So there's no investigation that we have ever lodged against Getemane, despite of what he had said, of how he has behaved. So this is just to indicate that I'm not going all out to target a person. He's not a person that I target. That's why when I want to talk to him, I'll call him that I want to talk to you, because I don't have issues with him. Despite of how he feels about me and then disappears. But that's him. So Matibet did the same thing. The fact that there's investigations happening is because evidence now comes before me. Before that, I'm sure people didn't even know me. That's why they didn't raise those things. Because when I looked at how old are these things that they're raising, some of them a couple of years old, and I asked, but why these things are not spoken? They say, no, we're afraid of this man. We thought he's that powerful, he controls everything. Until we see someone that can challenge him, that's why we feel that must come to you.
You know, General, since for the past 6 months, since we started with the ad hoc committee, and I think with developments at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry, I suppose the country knows a lot now, more than what we knew before then. I'm just saying, during the lifespan of the ad hoc committee, the proceedings here and the proceedings in the Commission of Inquiry, I think people are much more educated about many things that are going on. Of course, some of them are yet to be verified, yet to be confirmed. Some of them might end in court. But I would imagine that to a very large extent, the revelations that have been playing out in the public domain on their own should serve as a deterrent in terms of other police officers or anybody else in society engaging in the wrong activities similar to what we're dealing with. But I just want to know, and of course, more and above that being a deterrent on its own, the quality of the corrective measures that we should take as Parliament and the Executive should add even a much more important weight in avoiding the recurrence of the same or similar situation in the future. But how much of what we have learned over these proceedings was well known already to somebody like you?
And well, I would say 50-50, but there's quite a lot of things that has come to the fore that I was not aware of as a police officer myself. There's other information that came to me that has not gone to both of these structures that have been established that I became aware of, such as what we spoke about Matibedi as an example. Information of corruption that we start hearing about, that we, otherwise I would not have known about it. But in the sense of it, and I realize that it's across the board. And the people that are mostly in the forefront of the wrong that's happening, especially outside the police, is involving procurement issues of government. There's a lot of corruption happening in there. The people are coming forward and exposing it. And the unfortunate part is that we have decided that certain level of corruption must only be investigated by the Hawks. So even if I'm aware of it, I must now pass it to the Hawks. And then when you pass it, you don't know what happens from there onward. And that's the only unfortunate part that happens. But by and large, the things are coming up. And we are getting information about things happening in other provinces. And then when you engage people, say, but go to the police station, open a case, and they will tell you, no, this one will go nowhere. And they come with some reasons as to why. And it kind of frustrates you. But that makes me realize that there's more problems that we have that otherwise are not known that we must start looking at, that the government must start looking at.
How do you suggest we deal with that, just that concern you have, that now things must be referred to the Hawks? If they are not referred to the Hawks, what else should be done? Because that may also have to do with the kind of legislation that we may have to propose at the end of our work. I'm hearing you saying something pops up and then you must refer it to the Hawks. And I get a sense that you are frustrated by that referral.
Yeah, well, I think in terms of the investigation reforms that we need to have, and I'm going to invite you to take the legislation that established IDEC, that's NPA legislation. Look at what you're intending to achieve with it as government. Look at the legislation that amended the functioning of the SAPS in the establishment of the Hawks, and check what is it that the government intending to achieve with it, and then versus the South African Police Service. These are all three levels now established in the country to investigate cases. And how then you separate, as a legislator, how do you separate who must do what in all these three investigating arms of our security cluster now? So if legislature takes that, because there's legislation that governs all this, then you can look at the SOPs then that are developed amongst these three institutions. One of them is how does IDEC take cases, who classify cases between DPCI, who classify cases of DPCI versus the one that are dealt with in the South African Police Service separately, a normal detective service within the SAPS. And what type of case then goes to IDEC versus that which is at DPCI. So when you start looking at that and see whether there is no abuse of the system in between, does each one achieve the objective of creating a safer environment in the Republic without being frustrated by the other one? If the case lands on this one's table, that belongs into other body. How does this case moves over? Is it the senior body that comes and takes it, or is it the junior body that transfers it to the other structures? So what are the rules that are put out there? So I think we might want to investigate the cross-referencing of these three so that we're able to align it properly in terms of legislation. But in the center of all this, you have one police station that must service all the three. In the center of all this, you have one provincial commissioner that constitutionally is overseeing all these operations in the province. To what extent does this provincial commissioner have a say over what IDEC does, over what DPCI does? So those are the gaps that may need to be looked at so that you're able to close them.
I just want to go back to the question I asked earlier on and about the knowledge that you have, and you're saying at 50-50 in terms of now looking back now, Commissioner, if the 31st of December did not arrive in the context of the letter from the minister, now looking back, I know it has arrived, but let's imagine it did not. And you know almost 50% or something like that, even if it was 20%, of the information that has now been displayed in the public domain. What were you going to do with it, or what were you going to do with it, or what do you think you should have done with it in an event where the 31st of December did not arrive? Not as a date, but in context, as that letter which has triggered all that has evolved up to the July press conference.
I must indicate that we have been operating, identifying some challenges, but the limitation that we had was to address those internally within the structures. Make recommendation of this, make recommendation of that. It is taken, it's not taken, and you leave it. But you see the problems, but you have a limitation in terms of addressing them. The level of involvement of senior police officers in criminality, it's something that we did not necessarily have any concrete evidence on. We will suspect. That's why I say there are colleagues that have begun to question their lifestyle. But we're not necessarily conducting that lifestyle audit. And I kept on talking about it. You can see that this one looks like he's living large. And we don't know where he gets the money from. But nothing has been done. We therefore couldn't necessarily investigate anything going forward. We'll just leave it like that. But I think the events that took place, that was informed by the letter, has brought into light some of these lifestyles of these generals. Only then you get to realize, oh, this is where this thing comes from. Typical example, I was one of the people invited by Charles Beer when he got promoted to come and celebrate with him. I declined because we're not friends. And I thought, why must I go and celebrate his promotion? We're not friends, I'm not going there. They went there. Oh Lord, Jaro Kumar was there as well. I don't know if Mashallah was there, probably was there. There were a lot of them that were invited. And subsequently that there would have been other parties. But I don't think at the time anyone thought of anything about Sibia. I must be honest, he was a very fleshy guy when he worked for the Hawks before. I was in the task force, and you could observe, every time this highest task force was in the forefront on those sites, I would be there when they come to attend those crime scenes. And he would come there. Very fancy person with fancy suits, like those people that goes to these modern churches. He was always flashy, but I couldn't connect as to what makes him to look like that. So now that we know what we know now, then you then say, but we saw these things back then, but we didn't necessarily dig to establish. So this has assisted us to say, when we suspect something, we then have to start probing. And part of what we then should do is these lifestyle audits that we are complaining about, we have to be very strict about, because maybe they might reveal things while it's still early that will help us going forward. You can't have a person who, like it's been already revealed, you are building a R1 million house in one spot. At the same time, you're building another R1 million house somewhere else. Who are you? Where do you get the money from? And you're driving a fancy car. So there are many signs that we might have neglected as management of the police that we saw, that we should have paid attention on. So I feel the way we're doing in terms of complaining, it's all what we could do, but there was limitation on that. Investigate when the information comes before you, but even that investigation doesn't take you far. But that's all we could do at the time.
No, thanks, General. I'm left with just two questions now. The last one, I'm going to be following up on your observation that part of the frustration is that things are being raised with the relevant authorities in terms of what needs to be done to deal with problems within the police, and they're not acted upon. I'm going to come back on that issue because there is a matter I want to raise in relation to your boss, the National Commissioner, exactly around that issue. But I want to start with this one, which is, I'm saying, is the one before last. The cartel and the Big Five. Whether they are going to be confirmed at whatever point, who are they, but how do we defeat them? Because these are people that we have to defeat, given what we are told they are engaged on. From what we've heard, there's nothing that they are involved in which has got to do with our national interest. It's more about self-preservation and about their own personal interest, the advancements of those. How do we defeat them? Because at some point, we can't allow a group like that. We've got to find a way to defeat it.
Honourable members, there are a few things that they're involved in. And I feel the other two are something that maybe we might want to do something easy. I don't know about the third one, which might be a bit complicated. The third one, maybe if I must start with it, is the tenders of government. The process of how these tenders are issued and stuff like that is something that government must look at. Once a person is spoiled of always getting tenders every other place where they apply for, and they become rich, it becomes clear that for them getting these tenders is not because of exceptional things that they do that justifies it, but it's the connections they have, or maybe the envelopes that are crossing floors that leads into them getting these tenders. But that's a difficult part to address because it does not only involve the cartel squad, but majority of business people that are involved in tenders. They're benefiting from that or even affected by it. The other two environments that are more of a problem, and the second one in my list of priorities is cash in transit heist. And I would wish government can come up with a policy once and for all that's going to regulate the movements of money in the country. That is going to regulate the cash, the utilization of cash in our country. The lesser we use cash, the better. And I don't want to hear anyone telling me that in the rural areas there's no connectivities. People in the rural areas have got phones. If they can talk on the phone, that means they can pay on the phone. So I'm not saying totally you can get rid of cash. There's always going to be cash there. Not everyone else has got a bank account. There will be cash. But limit that to the most vulnerable areas where there's not large sum of cash is used. In the urban areas, here where we at in Cape Town, we just have no reason to pay cash in any of the shops when you walk around. There's not poor people that stays here. Yes, there are people still on the street, but you and me can afford to pay with a card. So the moment you start introducing that, there's going to be less amount of cash that must be picked up. A vehicle drives in the morning to come and load up ATMs. A vehicle drives in the morning and come and pick up money from the shops because we bought cash. So they have these in their prop safes. They must give it to these companies to go and bank them. So that's the second part in terms of cash in transit. And one of them, when you regulate the movement, we have suggested some typical examples that if the money is in the bag, that bag is taken from the shop to the car, when the money is in the car and this guy is driving from point A to point B, there must be mandatory, at least, devices that are put into that vehicle so that there will be a robber. The moment he interferes with that truck, with that money is destroyed, cannot be used. A lot of things been tried. Ink is put into the paper. They take this paper with the ink, they get chemicals, they dump this money in a bucket overnight. The following day, that chemical is gone. They take the money and go and gamble with it. So if you can't use the money gets destroyed. There won't be need for you to even bomb the car. And explosives is a dangerous thing. So these criminals, they use it recklessly. And they're part of these drug dealers, this cartel, because it's easy money. So they blast these cars with inside job, because they don't blast an empty car. People within, they will tell them this guy's got so much money. Either the companies themselves or the clients where they pick up the money from will tell you, we put so much money into this car, as it moves, get it. And they're going to get it on the road. And that increases the risk to society. It makes our country look like we're at war zone because there's bombing everywhere on this cash in transit. So the reforms on cash in transit and the use of cash in our country, I think is very urgent, especially on transportation of money, very urgent, something that government must look at. The last one, and most important one, our borders. If we don't do anything about the control on the movement of our borders, we're not going to stop these drugs. Regardless of what we do with the cartel, we will not stop the drugs. I said when I presented that it is not only the big five that we have a problem with. They happen to be closer to the government officials, senior government officials, and take control of the entire security cluster. These five. But there's big dogs out there that are sitting and smiling. They are making billions of friends on bringing these drugs into the country and packaging them and reselling them. So until we control our borders, a typical example, police officers we have in the borders, they've been there for ages. The employment condition of a police officer, it's not easy for you to say you are here on a contract for 1 year and after 1 year you must move. We go through all the labor process to try and remove a person after we've placed a person in one spot because there's no flexibility in terms of our labor laws, employment condition in the police. It must be looked at. That again, it doesn't matter how good I might be about KZN, but the moment I'm so used to the port of entry on Durban, and I'm so immense into corruption, whether it's taxis, whether it's CITs, whether it's stock theft, whatever it is, I might need to move from that province and go to another province. Take me and say, now go to Limpopo. You become a provincial commissioner and see you can do what you're doing here as a civil servant. But we don't do that. We become so used to the environment where we're working, and then the criminality then start cropping in, because these criminals either threaten us or they're going to bribe us. Either way. So that's what we see happening in the borders. And I must say, it's not only the police in the border. Almost everyone that works there gets involved with the syndicate from all different departments, different entities in the border. They get involved with syndicates that are working there. So unless we do something about those border controls, we're not going to stop this. So that is the number one priority for me on the borders. Cash in transit, secondly, and the third one, we must start looking at the tenders. That's how we're going to stop this cartel. If we don't do that, you close the borders, they have cash in transit highs. You close that, they still run tenders because they're controlling some of the procurements that are happening, and they still enjoy life.
No, thanks, General. That was important because my own view is that it's not enough to identify the problem. We have to find a way in which we can address the conditions through which they thrive. And I think your suggestions are intended to deal with that. Let me say, General, I think we might have never said this in your first meeting with us here, some of us. But I think I agree with the assertion that that we should applaud you for your courage. And I want you to understand me very well. In this case, applauding you for your courage is not necessarily agreeing with everything you said on that press conference, but the courage to stand up for something that you believe in, articulate it, and be willing to face consequences is what I think you must be applauded for. History will judge and time will judge. As we conclude our work as ad hoc committee, as the Commission of Inquiry also concludes its work as to whether there was any value bigger than what you might have observed on the decision you took on that day to stand up and say something is not right and somebody has to do something. Why it's important that that courage is important to be applauded is because, and I'm saying, I'm not dealing with the merits. I'm dealing with because that is how our country was liberated. Some people had to take a decision that no matter what happens to me, but in this case, I am taking a particular position. And of course, if you take a position like the one you took, there are consequences. Like the one they took, those who liberated our country, there were consequences. Others were imprisoned, others died. But there's no way, even today, the country is going to succeed in terms of its development and reconstruction without men and women who are willing to take difficult position. And if it means they die and become martyrs because they acted in the best interest of the country. Now, with that being said, I asked your boss when he was here yesterday. I asked him, and I think I must ask you this question. And I know you might answer this question by saying we don't operate in the same way. And he said that when he was explaining to me that it's Mkhwanazi way of doing things, I've got my way of doing things. But I asked him this question because at the level where you are, a provincial commissioner, and at the level at where he is, a national commissioner, I think it should be expected, at least by ordinary South Africans, that once you arise to that level, you must be a person that can be depended upon to sacrifice, including himself or herself, for national interest. And I asked this question to General Masemula. If you did not go out in July, was he not going to proceed and implement the directive that he subsequently told us, now that you went out in public, he believed was not in the purview or in the domain or in the authority of the minister? I asked him that question and I said to him, I wanted him to do something that is not easy to do, which is to divorce Fanny Masemula from the national commissioner. Because a national commissioner must be a national commissioner, who may not be exactly Fanny Masemula, in the true sense of what Fanny Masemula is, when he's not the occupants of that particular office. And I asked that question because, and I'm asking it to you now, do you think that he would have acted differently? Do you think that
Chief Whip, your time is up. May you respond, General. His time is up.
Thank you so much.
but his cousin has also agreed to give me a minute.
Yeah, you're right, Honorable Member, we're not the same. The National Commission is a different person than me. And the truth is, what I'm saying this with respect to my boss, if, from what I'm told, Sbia and Kabinde did not oppose to the proposal, this team will be gone today. Because it seems like there was an agreement reached on the 6th of March with some amendments, but they already agreed that no, we're going to wind this thing down. So we are shutting down in a way. Had that follow-up meeting that was held in Pretoria concluded, they would have signed that deal without Mkhwanazi knowing, and they were going to implement it. I'm saying this with that respect that it was Ngabinde's behavior and Sibia's behavior that led into the ministers to say, I'm no longer going to have this meeting anymore. I think that kind of stalled everything. When I look at after the arrest of the members of crime intelligence that were responsible for the counterintelligence investigation that was happening in Gauteng, members are kept in safe houses. They are operating with resources from intelligence. This management of intelligence is arrested, and they are told not to enter facilities of crime intelligence. I fly to Pretoria, and I challenge management the second day after they were released that the bail condition does not say they must not work. It says they must not enter the premises. They can still do this job elsewhere. The management disagreed with me. They said they must not. So they did not. Departmental investigation was conducted. They were cleared. After they were cleared, they were still barred from doing the work. There were meetings after meetings after meetings. I had to again travel to Pretoria and sit with my boss and say, you let us be serious now. Do we want to kill this investigation yourself? Or you want these members to investigate? So you must decide, and boss. It was that day when he eventually signed the letters that reinstate these members to do the work. I didn't travel back. Then the members that are doing the job started getting support. For the good almost 5 months, they were not getting support. So there was no energy coming from the management to make sure that these junior members that are doing the work, they continue with their job.